Maruti has ramped up its production in December. It is very heartening to know for industry watchers, especially since 2019 had more than its fair share of production cuts by automakers. Has demand really picked up, or is the country's largest car maker keeping its arsenal ready for the shift to new emission norms from April, or is it a combination of all of this and more? Joining us now to talk about it is Mr. Shashank Srivastava, the Executive Director of Marketing and Sales at Maruti Suzuki. Mr. Srivastava, good morning to you. Thanks much for joining in, and a Happy New Year to you. Is it indeed a happy start to the new year?
Good morning. Good morning. Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for having me on the show today.
Yeah, so is it a happy start to 2020? A lot of commentary about production numbers going up, sales numbers looking slightly better than what people had anticipated. How are you reading into all of this?
Yeah, so if we go a little bit back in the first half of this year, H1, as you know, for the industry as well as for Maruti Suzuki was not so good. Actually, we had a negative in the industry of almost 20%. Retail was about 14-15% down in H1. But Q3 has been better. So for Maruti Suzuki, Q3 numbers, as you would have seen, have been positive, and December also has been positive in the positive territory. So it seems that in the last 3 months have been much better than H1. However, if you look at the industry figure for both retail as well as wholesale for December as well as for Q3 has been in the negative territory. So, and Maruti Suzuki has been a small positive. So I think on balance it seems things are a little better in Q3 than they had been in H1. But going forward, I think we will have to wait and watch and see how things pan out, especially because of the transformation in the industry from BS4 norms to BS6 norms.
And the belief that a few people who watch the industry from outside, of course, Mr. Srivastava, have is that because of the regulatory headwinds of BS6 largely behind, new launches, expectation of some bit of rural improvement, all of that would mean that volumes have bottomed out. They may not really recover too much, but they will not go down further from these levels. Would that be a fair estimate? Is the trend indicative of that?
See, I think what we saw in Q3 also was a lot of, as you just rightly mentioned, that a lot of people, a lot of OEMs were managing their BS4 inventory just before they switch on to BS6 production. Maruti Suzuki, of course, has been less affected because we have already introduced most of the BS6 vehicles, in our petrol portfolio. But going forward, I think there are two factors which still are sort of a cloud on this in this improving scenario. One is the high cost of acquisition, which will continue to be high going forward, especially when all other manufacturers also bring in the BS6 vehicles. It is expected that there will be price increases. So how the consumers react to those higher prices will be obviously a question to watch. The other thing is that we will have a price hike anyway because of the input cost increases across, and most manufacturers, including Maruti Suzuki, have already announced that they will be increasing prices in January. We will also be doing it as we have already announced. I think some of the OEMs like Kia have already announced their price hikes, and others are in the pipeline. So we have to wait and see how much will be those price hikes be, and how much will be the reaction of the consumers. Certainly there's going to be very interesting times in the next quarter and a little beyond, because we will then get to know how this diesel and petrol shift from BS4 vehicles to BS6 vehicles pan out.
Okay, since you're on the topic of price hikes, and before I get to the wider bucket of sales, inventory, etc., just wondering, Mr. Srivastava, if indeed the hikes are not very pronounced due to competitive reasons or demand being lackluster or otherwise, would it impact operational metrics in the first half? Because we have seen prices of some of the raw materials starting to inch up.
Yes, so absolutely. While the competitive scenario and also the market conditions don't allow large increases, I suppose, but then the transformation from BS4 to BS6 has a huge pressure on the cost. not just the commodities inching up, but also because there is a huge pressure of there is a cost of conversion of a BS4 vehicle to BS6, both for petrol and in fact much more for diesel.
Okay. I heard you mention about how you have moved on to BS6 in a large way compared to some of your peers. Can you give us some sense of how the inventory situation is looking right now? We did a small piece on Maruti a few days back, wherein at least our understanding was that now you're comfortable 20-25 days or thereabouts of inventory and therefore not a big problem. But can you explain this in a bit more detail, Mr. Srivastava?
Yeah, so as far as the overall inventory is concerned, we started the year with a high inventory of more than 30 days. It kept on going up in May, June, July, as you know, were very bad months for the industry and also for Maruti Suzuki. So the inventory had actually gone up close to 50 days. But over a period of time, we have been closely monitoring the inventories, and we have actually the inventory at the end of December have been around 10 days now and not 25 days. So yes, inventory is very much in control, and if you want a further breakdown of between BS4 and BS6 vehicles, because remember 70% of our sales in petrol is already BS6, we have sold close to 4.5 lakh vehicles already in BS6. So if you further break it down between BS4 and BS6, then BS4 stock of our petrol vehicles is actually almost nil for Maruti Suzuki.
Okay, so inventory is not an issue, then therefore a large portion of recovery, maybe not for Maruti as much, but for a lot of other auto companies and two-wheelers in particular, would be on how the rural recovery shapes up. Now, I wanted your thoughts, Mr. Srivastava. Yeah. Sporadic comments have come in from various managements. I mean, HDFC Bank a quarter, 2 months before said that they are seeing some pickup somewhere. The management of Rallis, it's relatively smaller compared to you guys, but and in a different bucket, but they mentioned that maybe there is some rural recovery that they are seeing too. What is your sense as you look at sales data from across the nation?
Yeah, so if you look at the current financial year, April to December, the rural sales, there has been a degrowth, but the degrowth has been less than the urban degrowth. That is as on a cumulative basis. However, if you look at purely on a standalone basis of last month retails, then the rural has been actually less compared with the urban growth. So I think this is something which we have observed after a very long time, because over the last 5 years we have always seen urban growths to be lower than rural growths. But last month it wasn't so. I don't think it's a long-term phenomena. I think it's a one-off thing, because consumers were also reacting to the high promotion levels which were there in December. Going forward, I still believe rural sales will pick up, and the sentiments, thanks to the good monsoons, has been very positive. In fact, we saw that in October and November, that there was a pickup in the rural growth. So it isn't substantially higher, but still there is green shoots that the rural sentiments are coming back to the normal what we had seen earlier.
Okay, and would normalcy mean getting back to the kind of sales levels that we've seen in the heydays, or would it be more back to averages and mean as opposed to peaks? Yeah, so I really don't have a crystal ball to tell you how much that recovery will be, or but the sense is that we are a little away from those peak volumes. I think we have seen a substantial dip in the first half. In fact, since August of last year, that is August of 2018, we are seeing a dip in retails, which the industry couldn't really figure out, because the stocks were very low, and it was on the back of 5 years of continuous growth, and the stocks started to bite sometime in March, and that's the time when everybody started, including the media, started talking about the downturn in the industry. But I think if you really go back and analyze, it's from August of 2018 that we started seeing pressure on retails. So I think the question was whether it was cyclical or structural. I think partly it's cyclical, but also structural, because we have seen in the industry now huge changes in the cost structure because of the emission norms, and that has also been one of the factors playing in the minds of the consumers, I'm sure.
And the banks also have tightened the norms, at least in the last few months, regarding credit for retail financing and also for inventory funding. So I think a combination of this had led to the downturn, and some of those factors still prevail. So I think we are a little bit away from those peak volumes. But let's see. As I said, we don't have a definitive view at the moment, and we'll watch the situation for a couple of more months before we conclude anything regarding the recovery in the industry.
Which is maybe a fair thing to do as well, instead of trying to guesstimate. Just one follow-up to an answer that you gave to me earlier, Mr. Srivastava, about how investors or other, not investors, excuse me, customers would have reacted to the discounts that came in the month of December. I read at least 3 reports, a couple of them from global brokerages, all of which pencil in lower discount-led volume growth for FY21 and FY22. Now, again, too long a time frame, but as you look, as the head of this business, looking at sales for Maruti nationwide, do you reckon that discounts would only come off, or is it difficult to call that right now because of the uncertainty on volumes?
Yeah, so if you look at January, already the retails, already the discounts are substantially less than what they are in December. I think this is also a response to the stock levels which OEMs are carrying, because they didn't want, probably the discount levels were higher in December because everybody was wanting to reduce inventory, especially of BS4 vehicles. So I think having that with the comfortable stock, I think it's obvious that those discount levels were not sustainable, and therefore with the more comfortable stock and the fact that the discount levels are not sustainable, you have seen a substantial reduction in the promotion levels in January. And I think this will go forward, and unless we see a basic recovery, we'll have some discount levels prevailing, but I'm sure they won't be as high as what we saw them in December.
Okay, I just one final set of conversation, Mr. Srivastava, and that is on competition. And the reason I bring this up is this: almost across all brokerage notes, almost everybody talks about competition, and at times I wonder that in the face of all of this competition, you maybe temporarily lost the 50% market share, but you reverted back to that as well. How about the competition thinking about what Maruti is doing, as opposed to Maruti thinking what the competition is doing? And that's why my question, for the next 12 to 24 months, would you reckon that Maruti will need to react to competition? Because there are a couple of players who've become large, Hyundai, Kia, for example, and some others. And would they kind of set the pricing trends, and would Maruti have to react? Or would you take a conscious call that you do not want to give out discounts and others might have to follow suit? How do you think the next 12 to 24 months shape up? Would you be competition for the others in a big way, or is competition indeed creeping up for you?
Yeah, so if you look at our market shares for December or Q3, or for April to December for this financial year, as also the calendar year, if you take January to December, it's all above 50%. So, as you said, Maruti is continuing to maintain that market share. On the price front and whether Maruti will react or whether the competition will react, I have a thought that since Maruti Suzuki has already introduced BS6 vehicles, many of them already in our portfolio, it is we have indicated the prices anyway. So I think competition will have to look at us and see what they would like to do with their prices going forward. As far as the discount levels are concerned, I think it's a reflection of broad industry demand, which actually affects us all equally. And also, if it is individual company OEM wise, then it is basically in response to stock levels in the factory as well as in the network. So I think that is the discount levels are a function of those two factors, the basic demand and also the individual OEMs having stocks in the network or in the. However, if you look at it segment wise, yes, so if going forward, I mean, if you look at the launches which are planned, most of them in the SUV segment, both for the competition and also, as you know, we'll be bringing in our Brezza and the S-Cross in petrol very shortly. So I think that segment will see a lot of competition, and in fact, just for your information, while there has been a negative across all segments in the industry in this year, large negatives in the C segment and the A segment, which is the hatches and the sedan, the SUV segment has seen a positive growth, which is very heartening because till October end, so even this segment was negative, but now it is in the positive territory. So you'll see a lot of action, I'm sure, and going forward we'll see a very competitive sort of scenario in the next financial year.
Okay, Mr. Srivastava, one final question. SUVs, and as you gaze the landscape of how things are right now and how they might shape up, what's your sense on the kind of launches that might come in that category for Maruti?
So we have already announced, normally we don't give a forward guidance to our product plans, but we had indicated a couple of months back that for Brezza and for S-Cross, both of which are working in this category of SUVs, we have a BS6 petrol vehicles which will be launching very shortly.
Okay, understandably so. But Mr. Srivastava, we wish you all the best for the new year, and keep up the good work is all I can say.
Thank you very much, and wishing you also a very happy new year.
Thank you so much.